Hi everyone. So this is book reading and discussion of my book called The Instruction Manual as it is written in the Cosmos. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into chapter 1, uh, Natural Philosophy. Uh, okay, and then I'll discuss as I go where I see fit, I guess. So chapter 1, Natural Philosophy. Section A, Introduction. In the same way, life is full of endings and yet has no ending. In studying the nature of reality, it is important that we think about it. What we see around us cannot be understood without careful consideration, using logic and reason through accounting for the whole picture. The philosophical consideration of nature is known as natural philosophy. Without thought, we are blind. Science becomes the practice of throwing darts. With thought, it becomes a pivotal practice for deducing the true nature of reality through a step by step process. This book is more than a study of physics, more than a study of thought, more than the sum of its parts. It is a testament to the importance of thinking without borders and becoming a lifelong student of reality. Section 2. So let me scroll in a little bit. Section B, the principles of truth. Absolute truth resonates like a body in the cosmos. It is always present, always interactive. As we think, we can move either closer to it or further from it. In the universe, bodies can simply stay too far apart to have substantial interaction. If we never get close to the truth, how will we ever feel its pull? Over time, even when bodies get close to each other, or other times, even when bodies get close to each other, their fields can interact in a way where they get pushed apart exactly as two like poles of a magnet. Indeed, there is only one way for a body to avoid being pushed away by another's field and instead to be pulled in through proximity and proper alignment, as shown in Figure 1. So figure 1 here, we see two magnets where their poles are the same, and we see a repulsion occur, which we'll discuss in more detail. Whereas in figure 1b, we see opposite poles causing attraction. And so only when they are in alignment by having the poles in the right direction is there a pull. Otherwise, there's a push where the two bodies get pushed apart, as in figure 1a here. There is but one truth. It is unchangeable. Its rays span across infinity, stretching into the most hidden corners of the cosmos and forever beyond, illuminating all that is. It is in truth's very nature to push away systems that resist, because it consists of all that is. It is unmovable. If we try to change it, to tell truth what it is, it will only push us further from it. But it will not be moved. Only when we are open to receive can we not be pushed away. Only when we are in alignment are we on the path to truth. And only when we get close enough will we feel its pull, for it is written in the cosmos. And I mean that in the most literal sense. The path to truth is without limits, as infinity knows none. It is not about reaching the end, but rather about reaching the beginning. And the beginning is in being in proper alignment by openly seeking the truth, and in getting close enough by seeing the truth. Then and only then and only then are we able to be pulled into the depths of what is. The universe's simplicity and elegance is infinitely more beautiful than any concoction of the human mind, as it is literally the manifestation of infinity. It is all-inspiring, breathtaking, inspirational, and able to bring any to their knees. What is seen cannot be unseen. Our path is long and the road rough, but like a system in the cosmos, The closer we get to a greater source of energy, the more we will grow. And when we grow, we find that what is rough becomes smooth. Like two magnetic fields in the cosmos, this reading, acts to put forth my stance. The question becomes, are you open to receive? If so, forgive me for saying, be mindful you do not resist before you get close enough. Take my hand for a moment, I know the way. So what I'm really getting at here is that consciousness, when we interact with one another, if we're not open to receive the message of another person, if we're telling the other person how things are, when they're trying to tell us how things are, in whatever circumstance it may be, it doesn't have to be necessarily the fundamentals of how everything is, just in a very general sense. In that case, then our fields interact where we physically push one another apart mentally push one another apart in a physics of consciousness sense. And so we don't come together. We physically, mentally push apart from one another, and then the distance of separation between us grows, and that causes us to not feel one another because we're not close in a mental sense. Whereas when we are listening to one another, when there is this loop of transmission and reception between the two magnets, in essence, then and only then can we be pulled to each other. And we have to be physically close enough, mentally close enough, to actually have the proximity to interact in a way where we can even do this. If two magnets are very distant apart from one another, then the result is that there's no interaction because they're just simply too distant, regardless of if the alignment is the same. Section C, finding the ground level in science. We are observers composed of atoms as our largest building blocks. We find ourselves in an environment of many such building blocks, some larger than atoms, planets, stars, black holes, and some smaller than atoms, electrons, subatomic particles, photons, and beyond. In our search for scientific understanding of how the universe functions, it is imperative that we start from the ground level. This is akin to building a house. We must start at the foundation and build upwards. We cannot build the top of the house and slowly fill in the space between down to the foundation. So the question becomes, where is the ground level? On the surface, it is possible to quickly conclude that the ground level is small. It is this smallness that builds into larger things, into larger still, to create all that we see, after all. However, the flaw in this technique is non-trivial. This process begins with that which is understood least to attempt to explain that which is understood most. The reason quantum mechanics does not explain that which we see with our eyes is because it is not a ground-up approach, but rather a top-down approach. Just because the systems are smaller does not mean that they are simpler. Alternatively, several attempts to explain reality based off of the opposite end of the spectrum, the large scale, have been made. In these instances, we have arrived at models such as the Big Bang and general relativity. In much the same way, the models begin with a top-down approach of that which is furthest from what is most directly observed and observable. The true ground level of understanding is neither the small nor the large systems we observe. Rather, it is what we see with our own eyes. We are the ground level. To understand the fundamental interactions of the small, it is a non-trivial task, and it does not begin by looking at the small, just as understanding the fundamental interactions of the large does not begin by looking at the large. In both instances, it begins by studying that which is most easily observable with our own senses. This is not just because it is nearest to us and nothing more. Rather, this is because it is the least approximated of all pictures. When we look at the earth, we see it in endless detail. We see the rivers and oceans, the layers of the crust, the atmosphere, and how all its constituents interact. We see the most amount of detail when we look at systems that are directly observed around us. As a result, they are the least approximated. In classical mechanics, these observations of what is directly observable are the foundation of reasoning that were used to develop the laws put forth by Isaac Newton. These are built on direct observations that are as far from being approximations as possible. Inversely, for example, in quantum mechanics, the observations are of what is most indirectly observable. We cannot look at the systems directly. We cannot freeze them in time or hold them in isolation and zoom indefinitely onto them to analyze how they are in a given moment. All we can do is see how they seem to interact as groups of systems. No longer are individual systems generally even analyzable in quantum mechanics because it requires many systems in unison producing an indirect observation of how they interact. The interpretations do not take into account what we see with our eyes directly before us. In order for an individual to accept the description of nature put forth by quantum mechanics, they must accept the hypothesis that smaller systems are more elementary than larger systems. Infinity, however, knows no limits. And what I mean here is that it doesn't matter how small they are, they're still equally as complex as everything else we see around us, and no more complex. Much the same can be said of the Big Bang model, which also uses the other end of the spectrum of what we can detect as a top-down approach. Rather than focusing on that which is furthest from our direct observance in the direction of smaller objects, the Big Bang's origin is from a focus on that which is furthest from our direct observation in the large scale. The same mistakes are made, and this can be explained through the models not building from what is most known. It is not possible to suddenly have an epiphany and realize the mathematics of differential calculus without first knowing arithmetic. With that in mind, the most important aspect of arithmetic is order of operations. If we have a simple calculation involving groupings of numbers that are added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided, the only way for a proper answer to be arrived at is through following the order of operations. All other answers will be, simply put, incorrect. Present models do not adhere to the principles of order of operations in deducing the nature of reality. Therefore, they arrive at answers that are ultimately incorrect. Rather than explaining the functionality of the universe as a whole, they serve as approximations capable of only describing the small portion of infinity to which they are designed. Further from their designs, they do not function to provide accurate descriptions. This is far more significant than a simple need of adjustment. A paradigm shift in the way that we view the nature of reality is necessary. In uncovering the secrets of the cosmos, the order of operations is paramount. The order starts first with studying that which is directly in front of our faces, observable to the most exactness of details of all observations we can make. This is the foundation of developing understanding outward, of building our house of knowledge with a ground up approach. Once we have enough understanding of that which is around us, we can slowly start to branch outward towards the small and towards the large to get a greater understanding of those systems based on what is already understood with most exactness and the highest level of detail. Logic and reason are not things to be tossed aside in favor of force-fitting equations. Equations, in their very nature, are approximations. No equation containing a string of variables can ever be concocted that encompasses the interactions of all particles in the infinite universe, as all equations inherently limit. The true equation of the universe does not need written on a piece of paper or in a textbook. It is written in the universe itself, where infinity is manifest. From a ground-up approach, the universe can be understood. All other approaches, starting by the study of systems of which we form the greatest approximations, are houses of cards. They may stand for a while, but the winds of change will topple them with ease. Truth, and only truth, will stand in the end. So I'm going to pause here and start another video. So what I'm really getting at is that the only way for us to deduce how things work are by hinging ourselves to what we can understand most, not by starting at systems that we really can't see. Earth, for example, is probably the best example of a particle that we can define in such a high amount of detail that it is leagues and leagues beyond our understanding of any other particle. And so in this way, it is necessary to start from Earth and what we see around us, which is really a classical mechanics approach, and move outward towards the smaller and towards the larger, and try to understand how the same mechanisms that we see around us apply to the entire range of observations. So I'll pick up on section D here, when Newton's laws were held in esteem, in the next video. Thanks for watching.